Hello, team and Dave. Welcome to another ATP Geopolitics with myself, Jonathan M.S. Pierce. This is a Ukraine War Update Extra video giving you extra tidbits and nuggets to get your teeth into to give you a greater understanding of the war in Ukraine. I'm going to go to somewhere I neglected to talk about in the frontline update this morning because I didn't want it to go on too long, but this is worthy of note. It's in the Institute for the Study of War discussion pieces at the beginning of their daily report, and it concerns the Shoigu's announcements with regard to the Russian Air Force. So, Russian Defense Minister Sergei Shoigu announced that the Russian Ministry of Defense intends to increase the size of Russia's air defenses forces at a Russian MOD Collegium on March 22nd. Shoigu stated that one of the Russian Aerospace Forces (VKS) development priorities is to generate more air defense units with advanced air defense systems. He noted that in 2023, Russian forces plan to form a new air defense division and brigade, form a special purpose air defense missile brigade, and form a new anti-aircraft missile regiment with more advanced S-350 systems, form a military transport aviation regiment, and complete the modernization of Moscow City's air defense systems. Well, that's not a lot to do, and they're known for doing stuff on time, right? Shoigu also commented on Russian combat experience in Ukraine, stating that Russian pilots conducted over 140,000 combat sorties since February the 24th, 2022, and that 90% of operational, tactical, and army aviation, 60% of strategic long-range aviation, and 85% of UAV operators have combat experience. Okay, so big plans for the Russians there. They want to absolutely, they want to expand all components, it appears, of their air defense provision. The Russian military is unlikely to generate such forces within several years, let alone by the end of 2023, says the ISW. Russia's defense industrial base has historically experienced multi-year delays in developing advanced air defense systems, even before the strict sanctions and exacerbated resource constraints resulting from Russia's invasion of Ukraine. I mean, so true. In the best of times, Russia's been massively unable to provide timely equipment, whether it's the army or the air force, and in budget and enough of it. Look at the T-14 Armata. You got like 20 of them. They're supposed to be the next big thing. They're supposed to be one of the main components of the Russian mechanized brigades. Just not there. So on previous experience, we'll be talking about inductive reasoning later. Next, actually, so it's the idea that, well, okay, what can we draw from previous experience here to apply this to present claims? Well, the claim is that we're going to do all of these things. Okay, well, previously it's come in late, over budget, and not very good. So what are the chances of this happening, especially since you are sanctioned, you've got constraints on your budget, and you can't get components, and so on and so forth. You put all of these things together, and so many of your trainers are operating on the front lines themselves. Now, this is the Air Force and not the Army, so that might be slightly different in that claim. But you get the point. These things are going to be difficult. The Russian it continues. Current Russian air defense brigades and regiments received their S-400 systems up to several years behind schedule. The Russian military had only fielded the S-500 system, which was reportedly supposed to enter production in 2015, in one Russian air defense army by 2021. Russia also delayed its planned delivery of a second S-400 battery to India in 2022 due to constraints caused by Russia's invasion of Ukraine. Russia may eventually grow its air defense forces as part of a larger effort to recreate a large conventional military in the long term. However, Shoigu's announcement is similar to his previous announcement at an MOD Collegium in December 2022, in which he stated that Russia seeks to form 17 new maneuver divisions over several years. The formation of new Russian air defense and airlift units will not increase Russian combat power in Ukraine this year. Shoigu's statement is likely intended to reassure the Russian people that the Russian MOD is continuing to develop the Russian military as a world-class military power to offset perceptions about Russian military failures in Ukraine. In other words, it's all fart, no poo. It's all trousers, no pants. All talk. It's easy to bang out these big claims, and it's a bit like Xi Jinping Chinese peace plan. It's like, yeah, we can make these big, vague claims. Yeah, we're going to do this. Yeah, we want peace. Like, how are you going to do it? What's going to happen? Yeah, details. You don't need details. Yeah, you kind of do. So yeah, I think it's unlikely to come to fruition, and if it does, there's an argument to say that the war will be long over by then. Right, Russian authorities are cracking down against bars in urban areas, possibly to crack down against internal dissent among Russian social circles. If you see what Russia has done in terms of, like, I love it when pro-Russian voices, absolutely bloody love it when pro-Russian voices come on my threads and go, when I talk about like censorship, so say something about Twitter, or say something about how certain, like, RT was sanctioned and effectively shut down in Europe from being able to splurge their propaganda. They were defunded and had to shut down. And Russian pro-Russian voices come on and say, "Oh my God, what about freedom of speech? Freedom of speech." It's like, dude, and this isn't whataboutism. Like this is like that is necessary in a war situation to stop disinformation. Okay, and I can, in and of itself, I can justify exactly what has happened with RT in Europe. Right, not a problem. But don't be so hypocritical as to attack censorship when Russia is the queen, the emperor of censorship, of a lack of freedom of speech. They've shut down all alternate voices, state-run TV channels, pretty much only. You have to toe the party line as far as what is said. You're not even allowed to say the word war, and they're still not allowed to. It's ridiculous. Anyway, so over time, Russia's been constraining society in Russia more and more. The Kremlin has more and more, so it looks like a complete dictatorship, like an authoritarian regime, which we all know it is, but it's getting more and more like that. And we're going back to like the days of the KGB, Stasi, whatever. Russian authorities cracking down now in bars. St. Petersburg outlet Fontanka claimed on March 22nd that St. Petersburg authorities shut down 24 bars as part of a broader investigation into claims of involving minors in antisocial acts, including systematic drinking, drug use, and vagrancy. Of course, this is how you dress it all up, but what's really going on? This excuse is implausible given normal Russian attitudes towards systematic drinking. It's like, we've shut all these bars down because of all this systematic drinking. Yeah, but isn't that a Russian thing? And hasn't that been going on for like ever? And don't you do it as well? And so yeah, complete nonsense. So what's really going on? So Russian Federal Security Service, FSB, personnel conducted recent raids against 2 popular bars and forced patrons to conduct pro-war activities. So if this is about systematic drinking and vagrancy, why are they then being made to conduct pro-war activities? It's because they appear to be anti-war, and this is shutting down places where you might get people who are talking negatively about the war, the special military operation. After which at least one Russian businessman stepped away from his role in managing the bars, as ISW has previously reported. These raids may target rich Russian businessmen like Wagner financier Yevgeny Prigozhin, who failed to deny current ownership of a St. Petersburg bar in his response to a Russian journalist who alleged that Prigozhin owned the bar in June 2022. These measures may also encourage self-censorship within these circles and among bar attendees by publicly displaying the consequences of speaking out of turn. You know, loose lips cost lives and all that kind of stuff, but it's the other way. It's not giving away state secrets or anything. It's like literally freely talking about being critical of your government, and you end up having your bar shut down and your patrons having their knuckles wrapped. This is authoritarian dictatorship happening, and yeah, there's not much more to say to that, but good stuff from the ISW as an interesting discussion points. Next thing to move to is a useful little sort of video or graphic to show. I've often talked before about the kind of creeping death that is Russian liberation. And I think this really shows this. Satellite images show what Russia has done to Ukrainian settlements in the Donbass, completely destroying them. This is Russian terrorism against innocent civilians, says Ukraine battle map. But again, it's like a creeping disease of death and destruction. Sorry about that. I'll turn the music off. But you see, these places just get turned into wastelands. Now, I know that you might also get a distortion in the different time of year, so you might not have the greenery there, but so often you just see trees completely stripped of all branches, just single poles left, where a once, living tree was. So I think even with that distortion in mind, this is yeah, it's just not great. It's not nice. In fact, there was a report that came out today, was it, or yesterday, that the war has cost Ukraine something like 140 billion. I don't know in what context that was, but part of that they worked out how much it was going to cost the forests, like in monetary terms, uh, and yeah, it's just the woodland. And obviously, it's an ecological disaster as well as a humanitarian one. Um, and it's going to take such a long time to sort Ukraine out again. Okay, a volunteer from this is Chris Owicki, who always has such good posts. So a let's allow you to see the picture nicely. A volunteer from Tatарstan's Alga volunteer battalion has spoken out about his experiences fighting in Ukraine. He says his unit was almost completely destroyed near Vuhledar. He is now facing criminal charges for leaving it and returning home after being injured. Tatarstan formed two volunteer battalions, Alga and Timer, last summer. The regional government advertised for volunteers and offered a relatively generous pay package, 260,000 rubles on joining, 170,000 per month when in combat, and another 2,000 a day from Tatarstan. The Tatarstan government was also supposed to be paying for the cost of equipping the men. The thread below from Rob Lee documents their recruitment and training prior to their deployment in Ukraine's Kherson region, and that's something that you can go and look at your leisure if you want. So to continue, a battalion member whose name has not been disclosed says that he suffered a traumatic brain injury during Ukraine's successful offensive in the Kherson region in September to November 2022, when a projectile exploded near him. The battalion was badly mauled in the offensive. Quote, "We were standing 800 meters away from the Ukrainians, holding the defense so they couldn't go forward. We could not storm in by ourselves. They stood on the heights, we were below. They could see us as if in the palm of their hand." And that sounds very similar to Vuhledar. A lot of people from the battalion were killed, maybe half of them. End quote. He had previously served in the army during the Second Chechen War in 1999 to 2000, but found the Ukrainian war a far more difficult experience. Quote, "This war in Ukraine is certainly tougher. Drones work here. We also have them. Tatarstan bought very expensive drones for us, but in the end, the Ukrainians brought them down. We should come up with a way to prevent their drones from reaching us as well. As it turned out, we shoot down a drone with a machine gun, and literally within 3 seconds, artillery, mortars, or rockets start coming at us. You can't attack or take cover because thermal imaging cameras are operating. It's very hard to fight." So that's fascinating. So the volunteer was paid 147,000 rubles by the Russian Ministry of Defense and was given a lump sum of 185 to 195,000 rubles when he volunteered, plus additional payments that brought his salary to over 200,000 per month. That's $2,589 US dollars per month. However, he had to buy all his equipment himself, including clothes, gloves, helmets, boots, and so on, which cost around 60 to 70,000 rubles. The Tatarstan government seemingly didn't fulfill its promise to equip the volunteers, who have also complained that they have received less money than the 2,050,000 a month they were promised. Their weapons were given. The weapons they were given were also inadequate, antiquated, and unreliable. Quote, "The guns were also problematic. They would start shooting and then would jam until you clean them. The combat equipment was made in 1973, 78, 64, didn't even fire. When we entered the Kherson region, we had 10 pieces of equipment. 5 pieces didn't even arrive. The rest broke down within a week, and one combat vehicle more or less went back and forth and eventually stopped too." And that's what I was saying this morning in the news video, or was it my frontline video, talking about the loss of equipment. I think it's my news one, And here is a, albeit an anecdote, saying, hey, we were supposed to have 10 pieces of equipment. We got given 5. They all broke down until we had 1, and even that eventually broke down. So were they able to effectively do what they're supposed to do on the battlefield? Almost certainly not. After retreating across the Dnipro, the volunteer received medical treatment for his concussion but experienced ongoing health effects that left him unable to continue fighting. He and around 15 other volunteers decided to resign their contracts and go home. Although he says as volunteers they were entitled to resign, the military treated them evasively. Quote, the chief of staff took one copy of the report for himself, removed it, put another one in, and the report was sort of lost. Ever since, they have been trying to find out why the discharge order has not been signed. They were in a kind of limbo. Quote, we didn't get paid and we didn't get dismissed. We have no status, end quote. Some returned to the front lines. Others were listed as deserters and investigated. The volunteer was lucky to have missed the Russian, quote, human wave offensive against Vuhledar in early 2023, which he says has virtually destroyed the Alga battalion and its counterparts from Bashkortostan and Orenburg. He says, when I watch TV now, I feel like spitting. They don't talk about it on TV, but on the 6th of February, during the offensive towards Vuhledar, the Alga battalion was put down almost completely. After that, they put down the Orenburg battalion, the Bashkir battalion, where they were all volunteers. My comrade, who is in hospital now, says there was no reconnaissance shelling. There were 8 to 10 men in each APC, and once they were on the offensive, some didn't even realize what had happened when they were attacked. End quote. The disastrous attack was documented in the thread below by Tatarigami. Many Alga soldiers were captured by the Ukrainians. Relatives say at least 2 companies, which means 250 to 300 men were killed. The volunteers attempting to resign from their contracts now face criminal prosecution as the Russian state says that Putin's mobilization order of last September overrides the expiry of their 4-month contracts. In this case, argues a representative of the Union of Paratroopers, quote, the contract of volunteers is extended for an indefinite period, most likely until the end of the special military operation, end quote. The volunteers and their lawyers dispute this, as they say it contradicts Russian federal law, which states the presidential decree on mobilization according to the constitution cannot be higher than the federal law. The case may provide an important test of what remains to the rule of law in Russia. Which will be the deciding factor, the Russian constitution or the decrees of Vladimir Putin. So here we have a really interesting, as I say, albeit anecdotal account of life in a volunteer battalion and the destruction of the forces, not only his battalion, but other ones in Vuhledar and indeed Kherson, their lack of equipment, having to buy their own equipment, not being given the money they were promised, etc., etc. I think it's a really fascinating insight. The next place I'm going to go to is Odessa, not physically, on a map. And this is in answer to SK on my thread this morning, who really took umbrage to my claims about a missile attack on Shkolny. So he said, today's episode really sucks. I prefer more thought out reports than a propaganda show. Absolutely anti-legendary. And he pulls out 2 timestamps that he has an issue with. The second one is the awarding of a medal to the pilot, which I have absolutely no problem with what I said there. But the first part is to do with the claims about this this building that was hit near Shkolny. And actually, he's right. I didn't do enough looking into what happened there. The TLDR, the long and the short of it is, I still don't really know what happened because there are loads of contradictory claims concerning this, as you would expect with 2 propaganda units trying to control the narrative. So the claim, the source that I used was no reports, who's pro-Ukrainian, saying 2 hangars with weapons and military equipment of the airview were hit on the territory of Shkolny airfield near the city of Odessa. Ministry of Defense of the Russian Federation said, and then he was sort of taking a mickey because the building that appears to be hit here is a dormitory for the monastery. Was I being too uncritical? I don't know if that's a dormitory of the monastery. I'd like to know what that insignia is. But there are various claims about this building, and it's worth just looking at the claims about Shkolny just as a whole as what happened. So what happened there? Well, there were, as No Reports actually says, two two missiles or two something. I say something because some people have claimed there may be drones. So two munitions were set. Well, four munitions were sent against Odessa, and two were shot down, and two others appeared to find some kind of target. What is Shkolny? Shkolny is an air base, and it appears to be where in Odessa. So, just to remind you where Odessa is, down on the Black Sea, it appears to be where a number of drones are released to attack one would presume Crimea. So, it appears that this strike was a retaliation to drone strikes on Crimea. Okay, what happened? Again, don't really know. That building was certainly a hit. You have a pro-Russian source here, I think, saying a Ukrainian air defense missile hit the building at Shkolny airfield. So he's saying this is a building at Shkolny airfield that was hit by a Ukrainian air defense missile. And actually, the damage isn't massive, so it could well be, while trying to shoot down a Russian missile. As a result of the incident, a building on the territory of the airfield was partially destroyed. 2 people died, 4 are wounded. And he says, as a result of the missile attack on the Shkolny airfield in Odessa, the buildings in which the Ukrainian military were located were damaged. So he's saying that this is where the Ukrainian military were located as well. So I suppose the question is this a dormitory for a monastery? Is it is that on the territory of the airbase? Is it a dormitory that military personnel are using? I don't know. I don't know. I have the answers to this. Tim White says more attack drones are threatening Ukraine right now. Explosions reported in Odessa, contrasting reports about whether it is a UAV being shot down or one of the kamikaze drones hitting the Shkolny military airfield in Odessa. The video is unverified, and that's saying it's drones and not missiles. So again, I don't really know. Let's listen to this. The sound has been distorted. I don't know if that's to make it more bassy or slow down, make it worse than it is, because listen to the sound of the person. So I don't really know what's going on there.
Сейчас ебанет, рот. Сейчас ебанет.
That does sound like a big explosion. So something big definitely did happen there. And that kind of explosion doesn't seem to me like that. So there's something else that has been hit. But trying to find out exactly what happened is really difficult, because when you get hits like this on Ukrainian sensitive targets, when the actual targets are hit, Ukraine don't really release the footage. Of course, you can, as you'd imagine, for sort of propaganda reasons or controlling that information space. So yeah, lots of other claims sort of come out, but is what's true. According to our data, the MiG-29 was preparing to take off, fell under the distribution. So is that saying that a MiG-29 was hit? But even the Russian MOD doesn't say that, and if that had happened, you're pretty sure they'd be saying that. So they claim that 2 hangars were taken out with military equipment inside. But I just don't know. I mean, it's the same videos, not really telling you an awful lot, and the same kind of claims being repeated over and over. So yeah, I probably didn't look into this attack enough as I should have done. So I do appreciate SK criticizing me on that, but I don't know that I can actually, having looked into it a little bit, that I can give any kind of clarity of actually what did happen there. That as it says here, Ukrainian air defense missile hit a building at the Shkolny airfield. But again, is that the Russian narrative, or is that a kind of neutral source, or what? As a result of the incident, the building and the territory of the airfield was partially destroyed. 2 people were killed, 4 were wounded. Now remember, when you start seeing verbatim tweets like this, so look at the wording of that, right? And this is Pierre that has a Lithuanian flag next to them. Is this really Pierre from Lithuania? Has exactly the same. I mean, this is a bot. Basically, this is a bot. It has exactly the same verbiage as this from Spriter. So I don't particularly trust it when that happens. It seems very convenient to me. So I'm fairly sure there's just propaganda working on both sides here. And just to show you a few more examples, in Odessa, enemies positions and UAVs were destroyed in the area of Shkolny airfield. So that's saying UAVs were destroyed. And then also reports that a Ukrainian MiG-29 preparing for takeoff was hit. But of course, as I say, even the Russian MOD didn't say that. Retaliation strike on Odessa. Russia reportedly responded on Monday night. 2 Monday nights, Ukraine drone attack on Crimea rail hub that destroyed the cruise missiles with an attack today on Shkolny airfield. So that a retaliation for the attack on Jankoy. It appears to have been. If I find out any more information about this with any different footage to this, I'll let you know. Right, I want to go on to my third part of the article, which is Glenn Grant, a British lieutenant colonel, I think that was in the British Army. He's now been working in Ukraine since 2010, has been helping train them. He's written an article, Ukrainian forces need to learn hard lessons as they fight Russian invasion. And this is a critical article about the almost Soviet-style leadership and culture within the Ukrainian army that still pervades. There have been improvements, but there's a long way to go yet, and it's very hit and miss. And I've been going through this. This is kind of like the ideal of what an army should operate like, and where Ukraine need to improve. 2 previous segments. Now I'm going to do the third one here. So the third, in this third section, we're going to start with kill bureaucracy. So a policy decision is needed to stop the current military system working from Soviet-style documents, rules and regulations. It sounds a bit like free market economics here. A new law needs, except there's a new law, needs to be passed immediately, with the key element placing critical responsibility to act properly to save life above the need to follow paper rules. In other words, the single most important thing is saving lives here. When we're making a decision, is it going to save the lives in the short or long term for our forces, or are we filling out paperwork for the sake of filling out paperwork? So last week, a typical delay was reported to me concerning drones that were purchased from abroad. They needed a signature for release from the Ministry of Defence to the unit that purchased them. This was not done for 4 weeks. This delay meant soldiers die for lack of drones. A policy is needed to speed up activities like this to a turnaround time of 12 hours maximum. Similar comments about drones have been raised openly in Ukraine media. So actually, I believe this is actually changing with the new sort of drone battalions or whatever they are that are being produced for the counteroffensive. And I have a feeling I read somewhere that they are allowing the rules to be the kind of paperwork rules to be bypassed for these. So hopefully that will be changed. But yeah. Bureaucracy, which is a very Soviet thing, it doesn't have its place in a dynamic army that needs to succeed on a front line by reacting super quickly to things. Right, training and education. Training policies are most important development needed for the army in the coming year. Soldiering quality and saving lives can only be achieved by adequate, highly focused training at all levels, from soldier to general. Training must be continuous. Every opportunity must be used to improve the skills of individuals and teams. It is no myth that the best training is war, but as we can see, that is also highly expensive in blood. The cost to the country of acting the way we have so far is too high. We are losing future commanders, suffering casualties, losing in military morale, equipment, and vital social cohesion. It also is politically divisive because it appears the national leadership does not care about the people they send to war. This dismissive attitude is not healthy. The policy must be that no person ever deploys to battle without proper training. So there were claims of this around Bakhmut recently, with the Kyiv Independent releasing an article that was really critical of the lack of training for some of these reserves that were thrown in to defend. Now, I believe the rationale for this was they didn't want to take people who were being trained, and they didn't want to take away from the offensive capability, the counter-offensive capability going forward. So ring fencing those forces and other trained personnel to get the untrained people who, if you're going to have untrained people anywhere, it's better to have them defending rather than attacking. So they put them back in it. But General Glenn Grant here, or Lieutenant Colonel, I think it is, Glenn Grant, saying that ain't good. One fundamental area of training policy that needs urgent action is the need for units to be given collective training. To understand this is a super important point. Compare the difference between a four-piece quartet and an entire orchestra playing a full evening with a variety of composers. In the larger NATO countries, collective training is regularly done at battalion and brigade level, and in major exercises, even at the division level. If new equipment is to be used effectively, then maneuver warfare must be practiced properly. So what this is super important. Don't just send like 50 soldiers, 20 soldiers, 100 soldiers there to do a bunch of training over a few weeks. So some of the training done in the UK it's useful and it's needed, but you need more than that. So sending troops to the UK to go and do trench warfare training, how to fire guns, how to clear out buildings. Yeah, that's all brilliant and that's good. Yeah. But also you need to do combined arms maneuver training. So you need, like they're doing presently at Grafenwöhr in Germany, you need a massive expanse of land where you're going to get artillery working with APCs and IFVs, working with tanks, working with infantry, and you need to pull all of these things together to simulate an actual war environment, such that these guys get training in how to do combined arms maneuvers. That's important. So he continues. This means that mobile headquarters with all arms and the Air Force moving together across large areas of countryside, not just in training areas, battle plans, physical reconnaissance orders, mobile fire support, and communications processes need hard practice from top to bottom and back again. Without this, the use of the new tanks will be suboptimal and perhaps even wasted. Centralized control will not allow breakthrough properly. Command must be fully delegated right down to leading tank crews. This must be rehearsed and tested first at brigade level and not just firing on the range. The basic training for Ukrainian infantry soldiers today is limited and well below that of any Western country. So in NATO, there are so many NATO maneuvers, even between armies or navies. We'll go and do maneuvers out at sea with a fleet involving UK, US, France, so on and so forth, together in these massive sort of training exercises that would much more properly simulate actual war. The basic training for Ukrainian soldiers today is limited and well below that of any Western country. It is much less than that given to soldiers in previous wars. It's vastly less than what's received by Kyiv metro drivers or teachers, for example. The policy of how and what is taught needs to be rethought. The courses need to be longer, more comprehensive, and harder. International support should be sought for this. A soldier's basic training should include learning all infantry weapons, personal battle discipline, tactical team drills, for all battle scenarios up to platoon level for urban and rural areas, both on foot and in vehicles, mine awareness, learning and practicing the orders process, communications and combat medical. Training to fight at night is vital. The suggestion that there is not enough time is mathematical nonsense. Simply recruit the soldiers earlier so they have more time for training. 100%. One Foreign Legion officer commented to me recently that when he speaks to Ukrainian officers and sergeants, it feels like they come from different armies. I presume he means here, not just they all feel like they come from a different army. It's like you speak to a sergeant over there and a commander over there and someone over there, and it feels like all of these people from different armies with different kind of training. Some might be Soviet, some might have a little bit of NATO training, and there's just what's going on. This is a colossal problem, says Grant, that hinders successful operations and tactics. Currently, it's a chaos with a mix of the Soviet system, the NATO system, and improvisation. Also, many platoons are commanded by sergeants and sometimes even by whoever happens to be the best soldier. They have had no preparation for this complex command role. These people must be trained properly. If they cannot be removed from the front for short courses, then doctrine and tactics must be put online so they can read in quiet moments. So simple things like that, really important. The goal is clear. Ukraine needs a unified school and a unified body of doctrine and training for junior officer training. This is so that all platoon, company, and battalion commanders speak the same language and use the same analysis and order tools. It goes on, but I'm going to leave that article there. Really good. Hopefully, it's useful and interesting for you. For me to serialize this article, there are a few more sections to go through, as you can see. So probably another 2 sessions on this article. But there you go. And I don't know that I have time for me old mucker Thomas Tyner, so we'll have to we'll have to spend some time with him, I think, in the next video. But in the meantime, hopefully that was useful. Thank you so much for your support. Please like, subscribe, and share. Really great to have you on board. And until next time, toodle pips.